July 1776. A promise of liberty rings out in the Declaration of Independence, yet its author, America's future president, owned hundreds of enslaved people at Monticello. The official story celebrates the champion of freedom, but a deleted passage attacking slavery, buried ambitions, and the lives he controlled reveal contradictions still debated today. How could the man who shaped America's ideals also imprison its people? The answer begins where words and actions collide. Drafted in late June 1776, the Declaration of Independence began as a single sheet of paper crowded with corrections and the heavy marks of debate. Thomas Jefferson's handwriting, steady and precise, carried a passage that would never see the light of public proclamation. In the original draft, beneath the familiar promises of liberty, one paragraph stood out in its condemnation. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. Jefferson's pen accused the British king of fueling the slave trade, calling it piratical warfare, and charging him with keeping open a market where men should be bought and sold. But this passage, nearly 170 words of moral outrage, did not survive. As Congress reviewed the draft between July 2nd and 4th, delegates from South Carolina and Georgia led a determined resistance. For them, the language struck too close to home. Their economies depended on the trade Jefferson denounced. Northern merchants, too, had their own reasons to object. The words threatened the fragile unity needed for independence. In the end, the clause was struck out entirely. What remained in the final document was a faint echo. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, stripped of its direct attack on slavery. The evidence of this erasure is plain in the surviving rough draft held at the Library of Congress. Jefferson's original lines, crossed out but still legible, reveal a battle not just with Britain, but among the revolutionaries themselves. In later years, Jefferson would recall the moment with regret, writing that the compromise was made to obtain unanimity. The deleted passage raises questions that have never fully faded. Why would the author of America's founding document write such a clause, only to watch it vanish? The inked-out words expose a collision between principle and politics, one that shaped not only the Declaration, but the lives of hundreds held in bondage at Monticello and across the new nation. In the silence left by those missing lines, the contradiction at the heart of Jefferson's legacy begins to take shape. Thomas Jefferson's path to influence began in the red clay hills of Virginia. Born in 1743 at Shadwell, he inherited not only his father's land but also dozens of enslaved people by the age of 21. The Jefferson estate, stretching over thousands of acres along the Rivanna River, provided the foundation for a life shaped by privilege and responsibility. Probate records from 1764 list more than 3,000 acres and about 30 enslaved men, women, and children, their names and values recorded alongside livestock and tools. The next great expansion of Jefferson's fortune came in 1773, when his father-in-law, John Wales, died. The Wales estate brought Jefferson an additional 11,000 acres and nearly 135 enslaved people, including the entire Hemings family. This inheritance transformed Jefferson into one of the largest slaveholders in Albemarle County. But it came with a heavy burden, more than £6,000 in debt to British merchants, a sum that would haunt him for decades. The land and people acquired through inheritance became the backbone of Jefferson's wealth, funding not just the construction of Monticello, but also his ambitions in law and politics. By 1769, Jefferson had entered public life as a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses. He served as a county justice, then as a delegate to the Continental Congress in 1775. His political ascent continued. He was governor of Virginia from 1779 to 1781, ambassador to France in the 1780s, the first Secretary of State under George Washington, Vice President under John Adams, and finally President of the United States from 1801 to 1809. Each new office brought greater authority, but his ability to act on his ideals depended on the labor and profits generated by those he held in bondage. Jefferson's rise was not the story of a self-made man, but of a planter who drew power from inherited land and enslaved labor. His ledgers and account books, kept with meticulous care, document every transaction, acres acquired, people bought and sold, debts paid and accrued. These records reveal a world where political ambition and personal fortune were inseparable from the lives and labor of hundreds of enslaved individuals. The resources that allowed Jefferson to draft declarations and shape new governments were sustained by the people whose names fill the pages of his farm books, often with nothing more than an age, a skill, or a price. These are the human stories that underpin his public life. By the end of his life, Thomas Jefferson had owned more than 600 enslaved people. The scale of this ownership was not hidden, it was recorded line by line in Jefferson's farm book and account ledgers. At Monticello, the enslaved community formed the backbone of every operation. The plantation economy reached far beyond tobacco and wheat fields. Enslaved men, women and children worked as blacksmiths, carpenters, nail makers, spinners, cooks and house servants. Each name in the ledger represented a distinct role. Joseph Fossett, for example, forged iron in the blacksmith shop, while young boys like Burwell Colbert shaped thousands of pounds of nails each year in the nailery. The nailery, established in 1796, became one of Monticello's most profitable industries. Enslaved boys, some as young as 10, produced up to 10 tons of nails annually. Jefferson's records show that in peak years, nail sales brought in more than $1,000, a significant sum in early America. The joinery, staffed by skilled enslaved artisans, turned out window sashes, furniture and doors, supplying both Monticello and customers in nearby towns. Every finished product, every pound of wheat, every barrel of nails was measured against the debts and expenses that shadowed Jefferson's accounts. The farm book tracked not only labor, but also births, deaths, and transfers. Names, ages, skills, and family ties were listed with the same precision as livestock or tools. The population at Monticello shifted constantly from about 130 enslaved people at its height to smaller numbers as Jefferson's finances declined. Even so, the ledgers reveal a world where human beings were counted as capital. In 1826, the estate's appraisers valued enslaved people at more than 2/3 of Jefferson's total assets. The numbers, stark and silent, tell a story of lives measured, traded, and tallied to sustain the world Jefferson built. In January 1827, the silence of Monticello's halls gave way to the voices of auctioneers and buyers. Jefferson's death had left behind debts that far outweighed any remaining assets. The solution, as detailed in the probate inventory, was the public sale of nearly all the enslaved people who had lived and worked on the estate. Over 120 men, women and children were listed in columns by name, age, skill, and assigned value, alongside farm tools and livestock. The auction, held on the grounds of Monticello, was attended by neighbors, merchants, and speculators, each holding a printed list that reduced lives to lines on a ledger. The scale of the sale is confirmed by the original probate documents now preserved in the Monticello archives. Each entry was checked and rechecked by modern curators who compare handwritten tallies against bills of sale and family records. This process, part forensic accounting and part historical recovery, allows for a precise reconstruction of the dispersal. Names like Ursula Granger, Joseph Fossett, and the Hemings children appear in these records, their fates determined by the highest bidder, or, in rare cases, by family members able to purchase their loved ones' freedom. Curators described the 1827 auction as one of the largest single dispersals of enslaved people in Virginia's history. The sale raised more than $4,500, a fraction of what creditors demanded, but enough to settle immediate claims. The records reveal not only the economic machinery of the estate, but also the personal cost. Families separated, children sold away from parents, and entire communities scattered across the region. Each line in the inventory marks a turning point where the debts of one man reshaped the lives of many. The evidence, verified and catalogued by scholars, stands as both a financial reckoning and a human tragedy, linking the arithmetic of debt to the lived reality of those whose stories are etched in the archive. James Hemings learned French cuisine in the kitchens of Paris, mastering sauces and pastries for Jefferson's diplomatic table. At just 21, he negotiated for his freedom, agreeing to train his younger brother Peter as a replacement. In 1796, Jefferson signed the manumission papers granting James a rare escape from bondage and a measure of freedom. Yet most of the Hemings family remained at Monticello, their futures still tied to Jefferson's fortunes. Ursula Granger's name appears again and again in Jefferson's farm book. She managed the main kitchen, oversaw dairy production, and trained younger women in household skills. Her son Isaac Granger Jefferson remembered the day his mother was separated from her children. In his later memoir, Isaac described the pain of families divided by sale or reassignment, each transfer a silent wound recorded only in ledgers. Joseph Fossett worked as Monticello's chief blacksmith. His skill kept the plantation's tools and wagons in motion. Fossett's wife Edith was a cook. Their children grew up in the shadow of the forge. When Jefferson died, Fossett was among the few granted freedom in the will. But freedom came at a price. His wife and children were sold at the 1827 auction. Fossett spent years raising money to buy them back, piecing his family together one name at a time. These stories, preserved in account books and recollections, reveal lives shaped by constant uncertainty. Names like Hemings, Granger, and Fossett stand out against the columns of numbers, reminders that behind every entry was a person, a family, and a struggle for dignity. Jefferson's private writings reveal a mind uneasy with the world he controlled. In his 1785 Notes on the State of Virginia, he wrote, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever." The words ring with anxiety, yet they echo only in his letters and books, not in his actions as a public leader. He described slavery as a moral depravity and a hideous blot, warning that the nation risked divine retribution. But these warnings remained theoretical. No abolition bill bears his name. As president from 1801 to 1809, Jefferson did not introduce legislation to end slavery, nor did he urge Congress to act. His presidential records show no cabinet memos or public addresses calling for emancipation. Instead, he argued for gradual change, often citing fears of social upheaval or violent conflict if slavery ended suddenly. In an 1820 letter, he compared the country's dilemma to holding a wolf by the ears, unable to hold on safely, unable to let go. Yet even as he acknowledged the danger, Jefferson continued to rely on enslaved labor for his comfort and fortune. The gap between his private doubts and his public silence is preserved in the documents he left behind, passionate arguments against slavery, and ledgers that catalogue the daily output of enslaved workers. In the end, Jefferson's legacy is defined as much by what he did not do as by what he wrote. His own words, set beside his inaction, deepen the contradiction that runs through Monticello and the new American Republic. Monticello's public story has changed dramatically in recent years. Where house tours once focused on architecture and Jefferson's inventions, today's exhibits place the lives of enslaved people at the center. In 2018, Monticello opened a permanent exhibit dedicated to Sally Hemings, drawing directly from Jefferson's own records and DNA evidence to present her as a central figure in the plantation's history. The exhibit overhaul did not stop there. Curators now use Jefferson's farm book and estate inventories to reconstruct daily life on Mulberry Row, displaying tools, household items, and even ledger pages listing names, ages, and skills. Visitors can trace the stories of families like the Hemingses and Fossetts, following archival documents that detail their labor, relationships, and fates after Jefferson's death. The approach is deliberate. Every claim is documented, every story anchored in primary sources. Curators describe their work as an ongoing process, one that relies on new research, descendant testimony, and a commitment to confronting uncomfortable truths. The goal is not to erase Jefferson's achievements, but to present a fuller account, grounded in evidence, of the people who built and sustained Monticello. Across the United States, statues and memorials dedicated to Thomas Jefferson stand in city squares, university campuses, and government buildings. In recent years, these monuments have become sites of protest and debate. Some have been removed from public view, boxed up, or relocated after community votes and legal petitions. Others remain, but with new plaques or exhibits that acknowledge Jefferson's role as a slaveholder alongside his authorship of the Declaration of Independence. The process for deciding a monument's fate often involves heated public hearings and careful review of historical records. City councils weigh petitions while historians and descendants speak to the meaning of memory and the weight of evidence. In 2021, New York City removed Jefferson's statue from its council chamber after years of advocacy, citing both his contributions to democracy and his ownership of enslaved people. Similar actions have taken place in Charlottesville and other cities, each decision sparking new questions about how a nation remembers its founders. These controversies reveal a deeper uncertainty. What should be honored and what should be reconsidered? How do public spaces reflect shared values when the past is marked by contradiction? The answers remain unsettled. The story of Jefferson's legacy continues to unfold, not only in archives and exhibits, but in the choices communities make about whom to commemorate and why. America's founding promises were written by a hand that profited from bondage, a contradiction still visible in debates over monuments, textbooks, and national memory. Today, nearly 1 in 10 U.S. public schools bear the name of a slaveholder. The ideals and the failures remain intertwined. How we choose to remember shapes who we become. What will we demand from the stories we honor next?